My Lords, I will resist the temptation to ask the Noble Lord the Minister to remind us what consultation the previous Conservative government carried out with either his party or mine over, for example, changing the electoral system for elections of mayors or indeed expense limits for general elections. But instead, to the heart of the matter, these benches very much share the concerns set out in the Rycroft review about the risk of foreign money influencing or even corrupting our politics, and therefore broadly welcome the government's commitment to implementing the report. I do, however, have some concerns about the intended speed of implementation, some of the loopholes that will remain, and one particular issue that is not mentioned in the government's response, which I suspect the Minister can successfully predict. But turning first to the intended pace of implementation, recommendation number 4 regarding non-party campaigners and related issues. On this, the government has said it will, quote, commit to consultation and further work, so not committing to action even on that one. On recommendation 14 on internet advertising, the government has promised, quote, proposals in due course. And then on recommendation 16 on think tanks and associated issues, the government's commitment is that it will, quote, will consider opportunities for further work. I fear you can almost hear the wheels of Whitehall grinding to a halt as you consider that phrase of considering opportunities for further work. So I hope the Noble Lord the Minister can set out some clear timelines for the government's intended progress on those recommendations, which are, after all, on substantive major issues such as the role of online advertising. Turning to the question of loopholes, I've raised before this question about the government's apparent inconsistent approach between politics and the media. The government appears to be sticking to a significant control test for companies that permits greater foreign ownership of a company that donates to our politics than is permitted for a company that owns one of our newspapers. It remains to me unclear why the government thinks that a lower level of protection against foreign interference is appropriate for our politics than it is for our media, and I hope the Noble Lord the Minister might be able to clarify that. The government is proposing, and I think in broad sense this is a welcome step in the right direction, introducing a new threshold of £2,230, above which pre-campaign donations to individual candidates would need to be declared. Now, that sounds a reasonable threshold until one remembers that British-wide political parties will typically stand 633, or, not contesting the Speaker seat, 632 candidates across the country. 632 lots of £2,000 and a bit gets you to nearly £1.5 million worth of donations that could legally, legitimately, and in secret be made unless the government also proposes to go a little bit further and introduce some aggregation requirements around those donations to individual candidates. So I hope the Noble Lord the Minister will be able to tell us what is intended on that front, and indeed the government statement is rather silent on whether such similar protection will be extended to, for example, elections to the Mayor of Greater Manchester or the Mayor of London. Those, amongst other elected posts at other levels of election, have important power. And although we have not had yet a track record of having to worry about foreign money in such elections, it would seem to me prudent to extend such protections. Finally, turning, of course, to the issue of the consolidation of election law and the dangers, costs and complexity that arise from the sort of messy and fragile state of election law. I've used the parallel of a teenager with a messy bedroom in the past. The government never quite decides now is the time to start cleaning up that bedroom. The Rycroft review said, I quote, "I urge the government to consider action in this area." Now, because that was a boxed-out urging of the government to consider rather than a formal recommendation, the government's response so far has been silent on that particular part of the Rycroft review. So I hope the Noble Lord the Minister can tell us, having been urged by Rycroft to consider this issue, what consideration it has come to. And if I could perhaps push on one specific example, because consolidation does not have to be a big project put off forever to only be done in one big bang. It's possible to pick off little individual issues. It's possible to, for example, look at redundant legislation on the statute book where the repeal of it would have no or only minimal knock-on consequence, and say, well, let's at least, a bit like picking the dirty crisp packet up from the middle of the floor. We're not going to tidy the whole bedroom, but at least pick up some of the easy bits. So if I can ask one specific question, the 1695 Parliamentary Elections Act seems to me is the perfect crisp packet, an easy thing that could be picked off, that could be repealed under the Representation of the People Bill. I hope the Noble Lord the Minister will be able to tell us that that is going to be added to the government's plans.